We're working on a 5 EAT valve body. Let's see what's in this thing. All right, first we have a couple 10mm bolts. There's nuts on the other side of some of these. This one is a bracket that holds a sensor. We get this out for you. And now we have a bunch of T30s that are going to hold this assembly and your solenoids on. Some people think this is a TCM, but it isn't. It's a logic box, and this stores your adaptive data that your transmission does the learning with. All right, now I'm going to lay these out in the order that they came out of the valve body. Now I'm going to take out the rest of these bolts that hold the plate on. And if you notice, two of these hold down little ground straps. You have another connector here. And one of these bolts we took off, this was the nut and bolt, and this holds this bracket along with your manual lever position switch. This gives your vehicle a signal as to shifter position. I'll just take this off with its bracket. It's being a little bit stubborn. So this is what we're left with. So we got a ton of metal on these turbine speed sensors. And underneath it you have a pillow switch like you'd have on a lot of the later GMs. Next, filter. So we have a bracket here. And we have this whole bracket. Transmission filter. And now we have a nut and bolt here. A lot of people get in trouble changing Subaru and Nissan filters in the car, or trying to, because you end up with a bolt stuck on top of the valve body that you can't get to. I'm going to pick this up. Two more. I'm going to pick this up, trying not to disturb anything that's underneath it. So we have a few items in here. We have a check ball and a spring. And we have a bunch of filters. And as much metal as you see in these transmissions, I don't think I've ever actually seen any in the filter. Now here we have another check ball and spring. And this one is a heavier spring. We have one more with a heavier spring. Over the drain. Now next we have this section of the valve body. There's nothing we could get in trouble with, nothing falls out. Put that on the drain a little bit. Now here we're going to have a bunch of check balls. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, so there could be either 5 or 7 in these units. This one is a 5 check ball unit. There they are. Another separator plate here. And again, there's nothing that's going to fall out or get you into trouble back here. So I'll let these drain in the middle in a minute, then I'm going to clean them up. When it comes to valve bodies, obviously they can't be too clean, so we're going to really sit here and clean the crap out of them. This is how we work on it and get it back together. Now I'm going to spare you this because you don't want to see me take 20 valves out of this thing. But when you're working on a valve body, if you haven't done this before, or even if you have, my recommendation is to take out one valve at a time, clean it, put it back in. So if you take this whole thing apart, you're going to have valves all over the place and springs, and there's a good chance that you can make an error putting it back together. So the first thing we do is take the retainer out of the valve bore. Okay. There's different ways to get the end plugs out. On this one, I'm going to try and load it against the spring tension and let it kick right out. You might not get that lucky, but we did all right here. Now we're going to clean everything. Clean the bore. Dry everything out. And then we're going to put it back the way it came out. So now that's one example, and you want to go around and do all of them. All right, this is the best way to put this back together. You have bolts that center everything. Okay, there's a longer one and a shorter one. If you compare this to a regular bolt, you'll see there's a thicker shoulder on it. And it also correspondingly is going to have holes that are a little bit smaller in the valve body from which they have to align. All right. So we're going to turn this over. Then we have a long bolt and a short bolt. Right. The short bolt is going to go here. The long bolt is going to go here. And now we're going to turn this over. Now these pins are going to serve to align everything for us. So there's no check balls or anything that have to go into this section. So we're going to put the separator plate down onto it. And again, on this side of the valve body, we don't have anything that could fall out, check balls, anything like that that could get us into trouble. So now we're going to put that down. What we do have in here are our 5 check balls. And I'm going to set them in there with some grease so they can't get messed up. But if you zoom in, we're going to see these are the locations on this valve body. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these are not standard 1/4-inch check balls. These are 219 thousandths check balls. Okay, now they can't really go anywhere. Now in this section, we're going to have 2 heavy ball and spring assemblies and 1 light one. It's a heavy one here. Another heavy one here. The light one goes here. And then we have these 4 screens that we have to replace. And finally, our separator plate that we're going to put back down. You're going to want to make sure that these are engaging into the holes of the plate properly. So now we're going to hold this together and place it down onto these alignment bolts. Put our nuts on. So now we know this is perfectly aligned and we can start putting the rest of the bolts in. All right, now we're going to put the rest of the bolts in. We have two shorter ones here. And the rest of them are the same. These three we're leaving out for now because that's for your manual lever position sensor. These Jacko transmissions are always a mess with all these bolts because they all are the same size, and it's kind of difficult to tell which ones hold the valve body together and which ones hold it to the case. And the spec here that we use are 80 inch-pounds. We usually go over these a few times, but let's do all these for now. Now we're going to flip it over. Now we're going to go to work on the back side, so to speak. Our plate, the switch that we showed before, just kind of locks in here in position. So these seals, you want to change all of them. They come in the kit. Now we place this down. So we're going to do these first two that hold the ground straps down first. One more ground strap here. Have to lube this up for a temperature sensor and all our solenoid holes. Okay. We have this and this little fork bracket engages in here. And that's what holds that on. Another 10mm there. All right, this is something to take a look at. Each of these has two little castellations on the bottom, and they're going to engage into these two holes in the plate. They might not stay now, but you know, as you put the solenoid down, you want to be aware of it and make sure those are where they belong. And the wires are kind of too short to put them in the wrong spot. So these engage into these pins. And these are not something that we need to torque. Sensibly run them back. These we are going to torque. 80 inch-pounds. Now this next part can get a little tricky because we have to put this switch on and simultaneously we want to engage this pin into this slot of the manual valve. I'm going to try and do this so you can see. Also take note that there's a cancellation here that has to engage up here. Try and do it from here. This might be a better angle. So as you see, this has to engage down in there. And this is real important that you catch this with this valve. This sits on top. What I like to do is put these in, but loose. Then on this side, you're going to have a nut and bolt. And that could go either way. And you know, obviously you want to make sure those wires are all clear and you're not crushing them under a bracket, because that'll give you a short to ground. And lastly, we're going to put our new filter on. Or back in the day when these first came out, you couldn't get filters. So if you needed a filter, you'd have to buy a whole valve body from Subaru, which is pretty painful. So there's long bolts and short bolts that hold this thing. I like to leave them all loose until I get everything in here.
Okay, John, I'll see you tomorrow.
So some bolts go through this thing to bolt it to the transmission case. So what you want to try and do is get it as even as possible so you don't have any trouble putting any of those in. So this is the whole assembly and what it looks like when it's complete. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.